Have you ever wondered why someone who once called you family can suddenly become a stranger? Why people who promised they would always stand beside you disappear the moment life becomes difficult? At first, it feels like betrayal. You replay old conversations in your mind, searching for the moment everything changed. You ask yourself what you did wrong. You question your own worth because you believed loyalty was permanent. But one of the hardest truths about human nature is this: most people are loyal to their own interests before they are loyal to anyone else. This sounds harsh, but understanding it can free you from years of unnecessary disappointment. From childhood, many of us grow up believing that true friends will always stay, always support us, and always choose us no matter what happens. We expect loyalty to be unconditional because that is how we imagine genuine friendship should work. Yet life repeatedly teaches a different lesson. People change careers. They change priorities. They move to different places. They fall in love, start families, chase opportunities, and sometimes become strangers without ever intending to. It is not always because they stopped caring. Often, it is because their own life became their first responsibility. Think about a traveler standing at a busy train station. Hundreds of people are walking in different directions. For a brief moment, two strangers may walk side by side, sharing the same path. They may even enjoy the journey together. But eventually, one train leaves for the north while another heads south. Neither traveler is necessarily wrong. Their destinations are simply different. Human relationships often follow the same pattern. Many people enter your life because your paths temporarily align, not because they are meant to walk beside you forever. The mistake most people make is believing temporary companionship is permanent commitment. They assume that because someone is close today, they will always remain close tomorrow. When reality changes, they feel shocked, but people rarely stay exactly the same. Their ambitions evolve, their fears evolve, their priorities evolve, and sometimes, so do yours. There is another reality that many people avoid admitting. Every relationship involves an exchange of value. This does not always mean money or success. Sometimes the value is emotional support. Sometimes it is shared experiences. Sometimes it is comfort during loneliness. Sometimes it is inspiration or guidance. Healthy relationships involve mutual giving, but unhealthy expectations begin when we believe someone will always choose our needs above their own. Imagine two climbers ascending a mountain together. As long as they share the same goal and the same pace, the journey feels effortless. But what happens when one decides to stop halfway while the other continues climbing? Neither person is necessarily disloyal. They have simply chosen different directions. Problems begin when one climber demands that the other sacrifice their own journey simply to avoid being left behind. Many friendships end in exactly this way. One person grows while the other remains comfortable. One begins chasing discipline while the other prefers distraction. One becomes focused on purpose while the other remains attached to old habits. Slowly, distance appears. Instead of accepting that growth naturally changes relationships, people often call it betrayal. Of course, genuine betrayal does exist. There are people who lie, manipulate, and abandon others when circumstances become difficult. But even then, their actions usually reveal something important. They chose what benefited them most in that moment. As painful as it is, they acted according to their own interests, not yours. The disappointment comes from believing they would always place your well-being above their own. This is why emotionally wise people never build their entire identity around another person's loyalty. They appreciate loyalty when it is present, but they never assume it is guaranteed. They understand that every individual wakes up each morning carrying their own dreams, fears, responsibilities, and ambitions. Expecting someone else to make your happiness their lifelong mission creates a burden no relationship can permanently carry. Notice the people who remain calm when relationships change. They do not become bitter. They do not spend years asking why someone left. Instead, they quietly accept one powerful truth. Every person is living a story in which they are the main character. Just as you naturally protect your own future, so does everyone else. Understanding this does not make you cynical. It makes you realistic. Ironically, this perspective allows you to appreciate relationships more deeply. Instead of demanding impossible promises, you begin valuing the moments people genuinely choose to stand beside you. Loyalty becomes a gift rather than an expectation. Gratitude replaces entitlement. Peace replaces constant fear of being abandoned. The strongest people are not those who believe everyone will remain loyal forever. They are the ones who understand that people may come, people may leave, but their own character, purpose, and self-respect remain steady regardless of who stays beside them. And once you stop expecting permanent loyalty from people whose lives are constantly changing, you begin finding a confidence that no departure can ever take away. Once you accept that people naturally place their own lives, goals, and interests at the center of their decisions, another important truth begins to emerge. The deepest pain is often not caused by betrayal itself. It is caused by the expectations we quietly created long before the disappointment ever arrived. Expectations have a powerful way of shaping reality. They convince us that people will behave according to the stories we have written in our minds, rather than according to the choices they freely make. Think about how often disappointment begins with the words, "I never thought they would do that." Hidden inside that sentence is an expectation. You believed someone would always choose honesty. You believed they would always remain available. You believed they would always understand you without explanation. When life unfolds differently, it feels as though something precious has been stolen. But in many cases, what truly collapsed was not reality. It was the picture of reality we had built inside our minds. Imagine holding a glass in your hands. The heavier it becomes, the more your arm begins to ache. Now imagine that every expectation you place on another person is another weight added to that glass. At first, it feels manageable. You expect them to remember every important date. You expect them to always defend you. You expect them to remain the same person they were years ago. You expect them to understand your silence, your emotions, and your sacrifices without needing an explanation. Eventually, the weight becomes impossible to carry. When the glass finally slips, it feels like betrayal, but in many cases, it was the burden of unrealistic expectations that made the fall inevitable. One of the greatest misunderstandings about friendship is believing that people never change. Yet change is one of the few guarantees in life. The person you met 5 years ago is not exactly the same person standing before you today. Their experiences have shaped them. Their priorities have shifted. Their dreams may have grown larger or completely different. The same is true for you. Growth naturally changes the direction of relationships, and not every friendship is designed to survive every stage of life. Think about your years in school. There were classmates you spoke to every single day. You laughed together, shared secrets, and believed those friendships would last forever. Then graduation arrived. Everyone moved in different directions. Some started careers, others built families, some moved across the country. Without any dramatic argument or betrayal, many of those friendships quietly faded. It wasn't because either person became bad. Life simply pulled them toward different futures. Many people spend years blaming themselves for relationships that ended naturally. They replay every conversation, searching for the mistake that pushed someone away. They assume there must have been one defining moment when everything changed. But sometimes there isn't. Sometimes distance grows slowly, because two lives are no longer traveling in the same direction. Accepting this reality does not erase the sadness, but it removes unnecessary guilt. There is another expectation that silently creates emotional suffering. The belief that your kindness guarantees loyalty. Many people think, "I was always there for them," so they should always be there for me. While kindness is valuable, it does not create a lifelong contract. Every act of generosity should come from your character, not from an invisible agreement that others must repay you exactly as you imagine. The moment kindness becomes a transaction, disappointment becomes almost inevitable. This does not mean you should stop caring about people. It means you should care without attaching your peace to how they respond. There is freedom in helping someone because it reflects who you are, not because you expect permanent loyalty in return. Your character remains consistent even when other people's choices are not. Emotionally mature people understand this difference. They appreciate relationships while they exist, but they do not try to freeze people in time. They allow others the freedom to change because they recognize they themselves are changing too. Instead of demanding certainty from every friendship, they focus on becoming someone whose inner stability does not depend on who happens to stay. This perspective also protects you from bitterness. When you stop expecting every relationship to last forever, you begin appreciating each season for what it is. Some people enter your life to teach you discipline. Others remind you of your worth. Some challenge your patience. Others inspire your growth. Not everyone is meant to accompany you until the end of your journey, and that does not make every ending a failure. The strongest people are not those who never lose friends. They are the ones who understand that relationships are chapters, not guarantees. They cherish genuine moments without demanding permanent outcomes. They release people without allowing resentment to poison their future. Most importantly, they stop measuring their value by who stayed and start measuring it by the person they continue becoming. And once you release the weight of unrealistic expectations, you discover that peace grows naturally where disappointment once lived, allowing you to see people's true character without the burden of imagined promises. As you begin expecting less from people, another truth becomes impossible to ignore. The real nature of many relationships is not revealed during your strongest moments. It is revealed the moment you stop being useful. As long as you solve problems, provide opportunities, offer emotional support, or make life easier for others, people naturally enjoy having you around. But the real question is this: if everything you provide disappears tomorrow, who would still choose to stay? This is one of the most uncomfortable questions a person can ask because it forces you to separate genuine respect from convenience. Many people mistake attention for loyalty. They mistake frequent conversations for deep friendship. They assume that because someone constantly calls, visits, or praises them, the relationship must be authentic. Yet human psychology often works differently. Sometimes people are attached not to who you are, but to what you provide. Imagine a large tree standing in the middle of a field. During the summer, people gather beneath its shade, travelers rest there, children play around it, birds build nests in its branches. The tree is surrounded by life. But when winter arrives and the leaves disappear, many of those visitors quietly leave. The tree did not become less valuable. It simply stopped providing what others wanted in that season. Human relationships can follow the same pattern. As long as you provide comfort, advice, money, influence, entertainment, or emotional support, your presence feels important. But when life changes, you quickly discover who valued the tree and who only valued the shade. Many people never notice this because they spend their entire lives making themselves indispensable. They become the person who always says yes. They solve everyone's problems. They lend money they cannot afford to lose. They sacrifice their own time to rescue others from situations they repeatedly create. They believe this constant giving will earn permanent loyalty. Instead, it often creates dependence rather than respect. Think about someone who is always available. Every phone call is answered immediately. Every favor receives a yes. Every crisis becomes their responsibility. At first, people express gratitude. But over time, gratitude quietly becomes expectation. What was once appreciated slowly becomes assumed. The moment that person finally says, "I can't help this time," the reaction becomes surprisingly cold, not because they changed, but because others had grown comfortable receiving without thinking about what it was costing. This is why difficult seasons reveal more truth than comfortable ones ever can. Success attracts many people. Influence attracts many people. Wealth attracts many people. But hardship has a remarkable way of simplifying your circle. When you can no longer offer advantages, the people who were only attached to those advantages often disappear without explanation. Painful as this may be, it is also incredibly valuable because reality is always more useful than illusion. Imagine losing your position, your money, or your status overnight. The people who measured your worth by those things will naturally begin drifting away. Yet there will often be a small number who continue calling, continue checking on you, and continue treating you with the same respect they always have. They are not staying because your circumstances remain the same. They are staying because their respect was never dependent on your circumstances in the first place. There is another lesson hidden here. Sometimes you never discover who truly values you because you never stop giving. You keep solving every problem before anyone has the chance to show whether they would stand beside you without receiving something in return. Constant availability can hide the true nature of relationships. It creates an environment where people become attached to your usefulness instead of appreciating your character. This does not mean becoming selfish or refusing to help others. Kindness remains one of the greatest strengths a person can possess. But kindness should come from freedom, not from the fear that people will leave if you stop giving. The moment generosity becomes a strategy for keeping relationships alive, it stops being generosity and becomes emotional bargaining. Emotionally wise people understand this difference. They help because it reflects their values, not because they are trying to purchase loyalty. They are generous, but they also know when to step back. They allow people the opportunity to reveal who they truly are. They understand that silence, distance, and difficult seasons often answer questions that years of conversation never could. Ironically, the fewer people you have after life removes everything unnecessary, the richer your relationships become. Quality replaces quantity. Trust replaces appearance. Mutual respect replaces convenience. You no longer surround yourself with people who only celebrate your victories. You begin valuing those who remain steady whether life is easy or difficult. The strongest friendships are never built on what you can provide. They are built on who you remain when there is nothing left to gain. And once you stop measuring relationships by how many people surround you and start measuring them by who remains when your usefulness fades, you begin seeing human nature with remarkable clarity. After you begin seeing relationships for what they truly are, another challenge quietly appears. It is no longer about understanding other people. It is about understanding yourself. Many people spend so much of their lives trying to be accepted that they slowly forget who they really are. They adjust their personality to fit every group. They agree with opinions they do not believe. They laugh at jokes they do not find funny. They hide their ambitions to avoid making others uncomfortable. Little by little, they trade authenticity for approval, believing that acceptance is worth the cost. But the price is often much higher than they realize. The desire to belong is one of the strongest forces in human nature. Every person wants to feel understood, appreciated, and included. There is nothing wrong with that. The problem begins when your need for acceptance becomes greater than your respect for yourself. At that moment, your happiness no longer depends on your principles. It depends on someone else's opinion, and that is a dangerous place to build your identity. Imagine a mirror placed in a crowded room. Every person who walks past sees a different reflection depending on where they stand. Now imagine trying to reshape yourself to match every reflection that appears. It would be impossible. No matter how hard you tried, someone would always expect something different from you. This is exactly what happens when you chase universal approval. You spend your life becoming a different version of yourself for different people. Yet you never feel completely accepted because the standard keeps changing. Many people unknowingly fall into this pattern. They become the friend who never says no because they fear being replaced. They become the person who apologizes even when they have done nothing wrong because conflict makes them uncomfortable. They remain silent when they should speak because they worry honesty might cost them a relationship. At first, these sacrifices seem small, but over time they accumulate until one day you realize you have been living according to everyone else's expectations instead of your own values. Think about a compass. Its purpose is not to follow the direction of the wind. It remains pointed toward the same destination regardless of the weather. Character should work in the same way. If your beliefs change every time someone disapproves of you, then your direction is no longer determined by your values. It is determined by whoever happens to be standing closest to you. One of the greatest illusions people believe is that pleasing everyone will earn lasting loyalty. In reality, it often creates the opposite effect. People may appreciate your constant agreement, but they rarely develop deep respect for someone who abandons their own convictions just to avoid disagreement. Respect grows when others know your kindness comes from strength, not from fear. A person who calmly stands by their principles without becoming arrogant commands far more admiration than someone who changes with every opinion around them. This does not mean becoming stubborn or refusing to listen to others. Wisdom requires humility. There are times when changing your mind is a sign of growth. But there is a profound difference between learning from new information and abandoning your identity simply because you fear rejection. One strengthens your character. The other slowly erodes it. Notice the people who leave a lasting impression wherever they go. They are rarely the loudest voices in the room. They do not desperately seek attention or constantly ask for approval. They simply know who they are. They speak honestly, act consistently, and remain respectful even when others disagree with them. That quiet certainty creates something people naturally admire because authenticity is becoming increasingly rare in a world where so many perform for acceptance. There is also an unexpected freedom that comes with releasing the need to be liked by everyone. You stop explaining every decision. You stop chasing people who have already made up their minds about you. You stop carrying the exhausting burden of trying to satisfy impossible expectations. Instead, your energy returns to the things that actually shape your future: your discipline, your purpose, your habits, and your peace of mind, ironically. This is often when healthier relationships begin appearing. When people see that your self-worth does not depend on their approval, they begin relating to the real you instead of the version that existed only to please them. Some people may walk away because they preferred the version of you that never had boundaries. Let them go. The people who truly value your character will not require you to betray yourself to earn their presence. In the end, the goal is not to become admired by everyone. The goal is to become someone you can quietly respect when no one else is watching. Because when your identity is rooted in your values instead of other people's opinions, rejection loses its power. Approval becomes a bonus rather than a necessity, and your confidence becomes something that cannot be taken away. And once you value your own self-respect more than temporary acceptance, you stop chasing friendships that require you to lose yourself just to keep them. As you stop building your life around other people's loyalty, something remarkable begins to happen. The fear that once controlled your decisions slowly begins to disappear. You no longer panic when someone becomes distant. You no longer lose sleep wondering who might leave next. Instead, your attention begins shifting towards something far more valuable: the relationship you have with yourself. Because the truth is, The strongest form of security has never come from having people who promise to stay forever. It comes from becoming the kind of person who can remain steady even when people choose to leave. Many people spend years searching for emotional safety in others. They believe one loyal friend, one perfect relationship, or one trusted circle will finally give them peace. But there is a problem with building your foundation on something you cannot fully control. People change, circumstances change, opportunities appear, priorities evolve. If your happiness depends entirely on someone else's continued presence, then your peace will always remain fragile. Imagine trying to build a house on moving sand. At first, everything appears stable. The walls stand tall, and the roof looks secure. But beneath the surface, the ground is constantly shifting. Eventually, cracks begin to appear. No matter how beautiful the house looks from the outside, it cannot remain strong because the foundation itself is unstable. Many people unknowingly build their emotional lives the same way. They place all their confidence, identity, and happiness on relationships that are constantly changing. When those relationships change, their entire world begins to shake. Emotionally independent people choose a different foundation. They build their confidence through discipline instead of praise. They build their peace through purpose instead of popularity. They build their happiness through personal growth instead of constant approval. This does not mean they stop caring about people. It simply means they stop depending on people for the emotional stability they should first create within themselves. Think about someone who spends every morning improving their life. They exercise even when nobody notices. They read books that sharpen their thinking. They develop valuable skills. They protect their physical health. They manage their finances wisely. They keep promises they make to themselves. None of these habits attract instant applause. Yet together they quietly create something incredibly powerful: self-trust. Self-trust is one of the greatest forms of confidence a person can possess. It grows every time you prove to yourself that you can survive difficult seasons without abandoning your values. It grows every time you face disappointment without losing your direction. It grows every time you rely on your own discipline instead of waiting for someone else to rescue you. Imagine a captain sailing across the ocean during a violent storm. If the captain depends entirely on calm weather, panic becomes inevitable the moment the waves begin to rise. But if they have learned how to navigate through difficult conditions, the storm becomes something to manage rather than something to fear. Life works the same way. You cannot prevent every betrayal, disappointment, or loss. But you can strengthen yourself enough that those experiences no longer destroy your sense of identity. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing independence means isolation. They assume becoming emotionally strong requires pushing everyone away. That is not wisdom. Human beings are meant to build meaningful relationships. Friendship, love, and support enrich life in countless ways. The difference is that emotionally mature people appreciate those relationships without making them the source of their entire happiness. They enjoy companionship, but they are not emotionally dependent on it. Notice how calm certain people remain during unexpected changes. A friendship ends. A trusted colleague leaves. Someone disappoints them. Of course, they feel sadness because they are human, but they do not completely fall apart. Their daily habits continue. Their purpose remains clear. Their discipline stays consistent. Why? Because the center of their life has never been another person. The center has always been the values they live by every day. There is another hidden benefit to building a life that does not depend on anyone's loyalty. You stop making decisions out of fear. You no longer remain in unhealthy friendships simply because you are afraid of being alone. You no longer tolerate disrespect because you worry no one else will accept you. You no longer chase people who have already shown they do not value your presence. Instead, every relationship becomes a choice instead of a necessity. That freedom changes everything. Ironically, this is often when healthier friendships begin to appear. People naturally respect those who respect themselves. They trust those whose confidence is built from within rather than borrowed from constant reassurance. You become easier to admire because your kindness is no longer driven by desperation. It comes from abundance. You give because you choose to, not because you fear being abandoned. The strongest people understand that loyalty is a blessing, not a guarantee. They treasure those who remain genuine, but they never surrender their future to the uncertainty of another person's choices. Their greatest investment is not in controlling who stays. It is in becoming someone who remains whole regardless of who leaves. And once your strength comes from the life you have built within yourself, losing people no longer feels like losing yourself. After everything you've learned, one final truth remains. It may be the most important lesson of all. When people hear the idea that no one owes them permanent loyalty, they sometimes misunderstand it. They begin believing they should stop trusting people, stop caring, or stop opening their hearts. They convince themselves that becoming emotionally distant is the only way to avoid future disappointment. But that is not wisdom. That is fear wearing the mask of strength. The goal has never been to become cold. The goal has been to become free. There is a profound difference between loving people and depending on them for your emotional survival. Love is a choice. Dependence is a necessity. Love allows people the freedom to be themselves while still appreciating their presence. Dependence quietly demands that they remain exactly as you need them to be. The moment they change, leave, or disappoint you, your entire emotional world begins to collapse. That is why emotional freedom is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. Imagine holding a bird in your hands. If you grip it too tightly because you fear it might fly away, you only cause harm. If you refuse to hold it at all because you're afraid of getting hurt, you never experience its beauty. Wisdom lies somewhere in the middle. You appreciate its presence while accepting that you cannot control its nature. Relationships work the same way. The healthiest connections are built not on possession, but on mutual respect and voluntary commitment. Many people spend years trying to guarantee that no one will ever leave them. They become people pleasers. They ignore disrespect. They hide their opinions. They sacrifice their dreams. They constantly give more than they receive because they believe enough effort will make someone stay forever. Yet the painful truth is that no amount of self-sacrifice can force another person to remain loyal. If someone wants to leave, they will eventually leave. And if someone genuinely values you, they won't require you to abandon yourself just to earn their presence. Think about a tree growing deep in the forest. It welcomes birds into its branches. Some stay for an afternoon. Others remain for an entire season. Eventually, many fly away. But the tree does not stop growing because the birds have gone. It continues reaching toward the sunlight, strengthening its roots, and producing new leaves. It understands that its purpose was never to imprison what came to visit. Its purpose was simply to become the strongest version of itself. Human beings often forget this. We become so focused on holding on to people that we stop growing ourselves. One of the greatest signs of emotional maturity is the ability to appreciate people without trying to own them. You celebrate genuine friendship while understanding that life changes. You value loyalty when it is freely given, but you never build your identity upon it. You remain grateful for those who walk beside you, yet you also accept that every person has their own journey, their own choices, and their own responsibilities. This mindset changes the way you experience relationships. Instead of asking, "Will this person stay forever?" you begin asking, "Is this relationship healthy while it exists?" That question keeps your attention on the present instead of trapping you in constant fear about the future. You stop trying to predict every ending and start appreciating every meaningful moment. There is another unexpected benefit to emotional independence. It allows you to love more honestly. When you are no longer driven by fear of abandonment, you stop manipulating people with guilt, expectations, or constant reassurance. You no longer need someone to prove their loyalty every day because your peace does not depend on endless validation. Your relationships become lighter, healthier, and more authentic because they are built on choice rather than emotional pressure. Ironically, this is when people often become more drawn to you. Confidence has a quiet magnetism. Those who know they can stand on their own feet naturally create stronger, healthier connections because they do not approach relationships from desperation. They offer respect instead of control, trust instead of suspicion, and understanding instead of constant demands. As the years pass, you begin noticing something remarkable. The people who truly belong in your life do not remain because you begged them to stay. They remain because mutual respect keeps the relationship alive. They choose you freely, just as you choose them. That kind of loyalty cannot be forced, purchased, or manipulated. It grows naturally between people who respect themselves enough to respect each other. In the end, the wisest people are not those who trust no one. They are the ones who trust with open eyes. They care deeply without becoming emotionally dependent. They forgive without becoming naive. They value loyalty without expecting perfection. Most importantly, they understand that while people may enter and leave throughout life, the one relationship that must remain strong until the very end is the relationship they have with themselves. And once your inner peace no longer depends on who chooses to stay beside you, you become impossible to control because your greatest source of strength has always lived within you.